If you didn't know the name John Korir before this year's Boston Marathon, well, it might be because you weren't paying any attention when he won Chicago Marathon last year in under 2:03. But it also might be because plenty of talented runners show occasional moments of glory. It's when a runner repeats the performances on the big stage that spectators start to wonder, are we seeing the rise of the next marathon king? Let's take a closer look and find out. The latest from the world of running, brought to you by AtoZrunning. I'm Zach, and Jane Hedengren has put the doubters and deniers to rest. She is undoubtedly the greatest girls' high school runner, and the last 2 weekends proved it in stunning fashion. But before we get to that, first, a general update about Andy and Zach, and Andy not being present. We won't put words in her mouth, but at least a note about where things are at for us and what we're up to. We've been talking about how we're starting to explore some efforts with content creation, some new attempts at some old ideas. And so an idea from a listener, in fact, that I thought was really fascinating was I've been talking about wearing cameras while running, while racing, and talking through some of the thought process that's going on while the race is unfolding, which personally I think would be like, I would really like to know that about from other runners, which is why I'm interested in creating those content myself, because I think that it could be quite fascinating. But we're still trying to figure out exactly what the hardware is going to look like and how to make this something that's interesting and works. and remember, we don't want it to be too difficult to do, because I'm trying to compete at the same time as create content. Maybe that's a bad idea, but the listener provided, thanks Carrie for the idea, provided a suggestion about, we talk about a number of different workout types or hard effort running types, and some of them are confusing or difficult to implement, and others are just uncertain in terms of like, what is the mindset here as I'm trying to do this. And she had suggested, what if we also made content where we're recording training runs and talking about the kind of mindset and the kind of thinking that's going into executing that run effectively. And I thought, it's a great idea, Carrie. Thanks. I still have to figure out the original point of what hardware is going to work for this, but we're working toward it. So here's where we're at. December 21 is the marathon project. That's the big focal point for Zach's running now for the next several months, more than several, but those months. And so in the meantime, there's a few things going on, but trying to fully rebuild the training base right now after that injury incident that needs not be described ever again. And that had been some time ago, but these things don't always come back immediately, instantly, or as we want them to. And so here I find myself in that situation that so many runners are at so many different times, which is I'm not feeling great every day. And I know who feels great every day, but we should. For the most part, we should, or we're not, or we're having some issues in other respects. Maybe we're not getting the training right. Maybe there's other things in life like sleep or diet and nutrition. But that is to say, I clearly was pushing the line a little bit in my build back in training, and so I wasn't feeling great for a stretch there in particular. And a day here and there, that's just going to happen, where you have days where you're not feeling as good. Maybe it was a long day of work and you're running later in the day, or maybe you're running early in the morning and it's really early in the morning and things like that. But when it goes on for a few days or for a stretch, that there are things that need adjusting. And so I find myself in that moment, like many runners, and immediately back off some of the efforts. And I thought, okay, I was supposed to run a steady effort run today, not today as I'm talking, but this was my thinking on this day. And instead, I'm just going to take it easy again today. And then the next day, I was planning to run something like almost 2 hours, and realized pretty quickly that I was not feeling up for that. My legs were definitely still not responding yet. And so I needed to back off a bit. And so I cut that a little bit shorter. Not to mention ran it very, very easy compared to even my normal easy and jogging efforts. And so that's the way we find ourselves. And now here I am after about a week of being careful with these things and finding that I'm feeling quite good again, back to a kind of normal state, and being able to build things back again. And there's going to be an ebb and flow as these things go. But next time we have a chance to get on the road to race, I'm looking forward to that. And we'll talk about when that is coming soon. At a minimum, I'll be seeing a number of you folks at Bayshore again this year. I'm not running the full marathon this year. I'm scheduled to do the half. But that's not for some time. We'll talk about that more later. All right. Let's talk about the Boston Marathon. So there's two problems here. First, by the time you hear this, the London Marathon probably already happened, but we haven't seen it yet as of the moment when I'm talking. And Andy's going to be a part of that conversation when we do. And so she is very sad to miss this reflection, the Boston Marathon, which was so exciting. We had the chance to watch it in full for the most part, as far as at least what coverage allows you to see, and it was exciting. Let's talk about the women's race first. There's a course record by 2.5 minutes, which is powerful, very impressive. And not just that it was fast, but it was a race. It was a race like we always want to see in a marathon that came down to even the last mile, and there were a solid group of women who were all competing, and only until late in the race did it fracture. It was very exciting. So Boston, as you know, is downhill for the first half, and then you get some hills for a bit, and then some crazy hills for a bit, and runners, that's where we see the race really unfold. But this one started pretty hot. It didn't take long for a group of 5 women to separate, and it was just those 5 the entire time. And so by the time the separation occurred, you had the likes of, let's see if I can remember who all the 5 were, because apparently I didn't write them down. You had Amane Bariso of Ethiopia. You had Irene Cheptai of Kenya. You had Yelamzurf Yahwala of Ethiopia, the previous world record holder in the half marathon. Helen Obiri of Kenya, who is the two-time defending Boston Marathon champion. And Sharon Lokedi of Kenya, who's won the New York Marathon and is somewhat of a kind of friendly rival with Obiri as countrywomen, and they've gone back and forth a few times in these World Majors marathons. So those 5, that is 5, right? Those 5 take off and just grind, and they're just pushing and driving, and it's wonderful. And then you get somewhere around like the early hills sections where some fading begins to happen, and it's Amane Bariso who faded first, and then Irene Cheptai, and then it was 3. And it was 3 for a while. And those 3 really put the hurt on everyone, and all 3 of them ran under the previous Boston course record, which is really saying something. Yelamzurf Yahwala, and then Obiri and Lokedi, all 3 under that time. So the winning time ends up being 2:17:22, 2.5 minutes under the previous best. Second place was 2:17:41. The question is, who was who? And it came down to the last mile. So Yahwala started fading, and it was Obiri and Lokedi driving at the last mile. And Lokedi's final mile was outstanding. Something like 5 minutes to drop Obiri and take yet another World Marathon Majors victory, and prevent Obiri from becoming the first woman ever to three-peat as a Boston champion in a row. And so here now you have the duel between the two of them just keeps getting better. So you had last year at Boston, they were 1-2, Obiri over Lokedi. And then in the Paris Olympics, they were 3-4. Obiri took the last medal, Lokedi not far behind in 4th. And in New York City, before that, they were 1-3 and 6-1 2 different times. Obiri over Lokedi and Lokedi over Obiri the year before that. And so what you've got is this back and forth between the two of them. This is Helen Obiri's 6th podium finish in the last 2 years. 3 Boston Marathons, 2 New York Cities, and 1 Olympics. And Lokedi's got, 4 of those same races. She was also on the podium. And so the two of them going back and forth like this just makes for spectacular running, spectating. It's so incredible, their performances. Both ran personal best times, by the way, to do this, and at Boston, which you could say, oh, that's incredible. Personal best in Boston is really saying something. However, it was a little bit faster year. That is to say, the weather was cooperating more than it often does. They didn't have like a major tailwind like they had one year where everyone ran fast. But neither of them, however, run the notoriously fast courses. They're not the ones going out to Berlin and Chicago and London. Not that they don't run races like that on occasion, but their main focus races of their seasons for both of them are New York and Boston routinely. And so that's why they've raced each other in both of those races a number of times. I think it's 4 or 5 now. And so you don't see quite as fast of times from athletes who focus on these more challenging courses, but they are clearly serious racers. And that shows in something like an Olympics where the course is never particularly fast and is often very difficult, and usually in the summer and super hot, and they take 3-4 in the Olympics. So it's really exciting to watch them race. It was just that exciting or more in this particular instance. And we should just note that Lokedi, for the win and the course record, took home $200,000. That's really something. Good stuff. Now, of course, to say you won like basically the biggest road race in the world, not necessarily the biggest, but one of them, and you get $200,000 to be the very best runner on the planet is, well, we're not going to dwell on it. All right, men's race. Despite a near course record pace for the first half, remember the downhill first half? Over a dozen men were still together in the lead pack. So they were flying down those hills, down that decline, and they had a group, and that was a lot of fun to see. In fact, that group remained thick well into the late race, with 7 or 8 of them still together in the Vicious Hills sections until close to 20 miles in. Connor Mance of the United States wanted a fast race for some reason, maybe because he just was feeling it, obviously. And so he did a lot of that early leading to really keep driving that pace forward. And if it would slack a little bit, he would be back up front pushing, which is not generally advisable in a marathon, except he's clearly in great shape and he wanted to take advantage of that downhill. And knowing that those hills would slow you down later, he just went for it. And it didn't hurt. It didn't hurt. It helped. Cisse Lima, the defending champion, helped a little bit in some of the early pressure too, but then Lima actually ended up dropping out around 30K and may have had some kind of leg issue, it looked like. And then 2-time Boston champion Evans Chibet also ended up dropping out, although the crazy part is that his last recorded split was 25.2. So he only dropped out right at the very end at the earliest with a mile to go. And that is interesting. I don't know exactly why, but he was fading certainly at that point. So you have some of the favorites not in the picture. So then the question becomes, could Mance win this thing? USA sends Mebka Fazigi, the next one to win it. And the answer is, well, he's got quite a battle still. Because when the hills get tough and the running is fast, you get a lot of carnage. And so it ended up being the case that Mance held strong through the hills, but he was in a pack of 3 who were, actually there were 4 at the time, chasing the lone wolf who at mile 20 gunned it. That is none other than Kenya's John Korir, the recent Chicago Marathon champion. And at mile 20, you are familiar with this if you've paid attention to Boston or you listen to our trivia. The trivia probably didn't actually say the exact spot. But that is the mile with the famous Heartbreak Hill. And he crushed it, ran like 20 seconds faster than everyone else in that mile. Maybe not quite 20 seconds, but it was close to that. And so a 5-man pack became 1 man and 4 chasers in the hills and the painful section of the race. And it was Connor Mance who really looked like he wanted to make chase when Korir took off, but couldn't quite commit and then realized quickly he shouldn't, and so he held back a bit and stayed with that pack. And then over the course of the next 10K, Korir grew his lead. Eventually, I think the biggest section of his lead was about a minute ahead of the next group, but it ended up fading quite a bit, and maybe that was because he was struggling. Maybe he was just easing up the pressure a bit to make sure that he still finishes well. Who knows? But still, one of the fastest Boston Marathon performances of all time for John Korir. Took the win, the victory in style. He ran 2:04:45, and there's a question mark here as to maybe this was the second fastest Boston Marathon of all time, but it's more than a minute slower than the course record, so I'm not quite sure about that. The next four then, Mukhtar Idris of Ethiopia, who is a two-time track world champion, ended up fading first, and so then it was down to three chasers, and so one man will not stand on the podium, as it were. The other three were Connor Mance, Alphonse Simbu, and Cybrian Katut, and they battled it all the way to the last 200 meters, all three of them. And Simbu and Katut had an extra gear that Mance just didn't, and so they left him behind with just, the finish line is right there ahead of me, but I don't have what it takes to close out all the way. And so Mance ended up fourth, but he ran 2:05 and change, which, if you're familiar with the numbers here, only one U.S. man has ever run a marathon faster. That was Ryan Hall in the crazy tailwind year of the Boston Marathon. And neither of these count as records because, as you know, Boston Marathon is not a records legal course, and so the record still remains in Khalid Kanuchi's grasp. But Mance ran a full 30 seconds faster than Kanuchi's record, which is really saying something, and becomes only the third American to run under 2:06, and that's really impressive stuff. And more than that, there were incredible performances by Americans all around. Let's talk about some of these other performances. 2:05:08 for Mance, who finished fourth, and he was only 4 seconds behind those other guys, which is incredible. Clayton Young ended up seventh overall in a minute PR, just under a minute PR, to run 2:07, which is incredible. Ryan Ford of the United States was the next across the line in 10th, so three Americans in the top 10. And Ryan Ford ran 2:08 flat for a 3-minute PR. That is the first time we've had three Americans running 2:08 or faster in a single race just like that. Really incredible performances for the men all around. Boston was so exciting. Watching it was amazing. And we could spend a lot more time talking about it, but there's a lot of other things to get to. So we will always have more reflections and thoughts on these things as time goes on. But keep your eyes out for John Korir, because now the talk is maybe he's the next great marathoner to watch out for. He certainly has begun to demonstrate that fact. Speaking of great runners, let's talk about high school for a second. And one runner really in particular. Let's talk about Jane Hedengren. Starting with the Arcadia 3200, actually it's a 2-mile. The Arcadia 2-mile is a famous race. All the great high schoolers try to run it and win it because most of those Arcadia winners go on to do great things after high school as well. And so it's just one of those kind of proving grounds, if you will. Jane Hedengren showed up, and everyone knew that she was the one to beat because of her year and how incredible it is. According to Dystat, the quote here is, "The legacy of Jane Hedengren grows stronger and stronger every time she laces up her spikes." And that seems to be true. In her own words, she was just trying to soak in the moment and make the most of them because why not? They're exciting times. And she may have done just that. So here's what happened. The Arcadia 2-mile is supposed to be, the best of the best in the high school at the moment. She won the race by nearly 30 seconds over these other incredible runners. She set 2 national records in this one race because they have a 3,200 meter split and a full 2-mile time. And so the 3,200 meter split gave her a record, in fact, 13 seconds under Elizabeth Leachman's 2024 time, which is really quite incredible because Leachman only did that a year ago, and here you have it. But that was 9:30.68. Yes, I just said 9:30 for a girl's 3,200 meter time. That's the new high school record. And her 2-mile time then was 9:34.12, besting even Mary Cain's incredible indoor record. And so now you have the overall 2-mile record goes to Jane Hedengren, and in the process she gets that 3,200 as well. She's just doing it. We'll talk more about her in a moment, but let's mention the boys race here. Owen Powell won in an insane last 400 meters of what was an uncomfortably tactical race. You have a lot of fast runners here showing up. In fact, there's like 5 or 6 sub-4 milers in this race, and they wanted a fast race, but they didn't get it for the first half, so they had to run a blistering 4:10 mile for the second mile just to put down what it takes to win the race, and Owen Powell had it. But he was not alone. There was some serious talent, and that's probably the real virtue here. His time of 8:38 wasn't terribly notable, but he did best the likes of Josiah Tostenson, another sub-4 miler, and Sam Ruth of New Zealand. Yes, he came over the pond in order to run this race on, I believe, what ended up being his birthday, or maybe the day before he turned 16. And so that's fun. And then Tavon Kitchen, teammate of Josiah Tostenson, the dynamic duo of sub-4 milers from Oregon, and he also ended up 4th in the race. So, and other great talents. So we've got a lot of names. These high school names tend to be, what are they going to do next type of people. Sam Ruth is young. He just turned 16. And these others are heading off to college here soon. And so there's a lot of excitement, a lot of energy, and a lot of names to watch out for as time goes on. But let's dwell on Hedengren now just a bit longer, because the weekend after Arcadia, she proceeded to break yet another record. And so if the 2-mile wasn't enough for her, she wanted the 5,000, and she wanted it in serious ways. So we talked about the indoor track season. Hedengren broke 2 national records, the 5,000 meter for girls high school and the mile for girls high school, both indoors. Her 5,000 meter was significantly faster even than Leachman's outdoor 5,000 meter best. And she just broke her own time from that race by a serious margin yet again, putting now almost 30 seconds on Leachman's previous outdoor 5,000 meter record. Yes, you heard it, almost 30 seconds. Jane Hedengren just ran, as an 18-year-old U.S. high schooler, 14:57. When we're talking about professional runners, we're talking about times like that. She just ran 14:57. Yes, sub 15 minutes for a girls 5,000 meter in high school. And that just is shocking. In fact, she only narrowly lost to 2 of the NCAA's best runners of all time, Lexi Halliday-Lowry and scrolling down, and Pamela Koske. And so the 2 of them went 1-2, and Hedengren was 3rd in that race. And why this is so particularly notable is because Hedengren ran 14:57. No women's collegiate runner had even run under 15 minutes until last year, when Parker Valby did it a couple of times, albeit. And then Koske and Lexi Halliday-Lowry just both did it as well, running narrowly off of Valby's 5,000 meter collegiate record. So that stands for a little bit longer, but really, this is early season. Does anyone think that Koske or Halliday-Lowry or any of the other top-tier women's 5,000 meter runners aren't going to break that Valby record? I think they're going to by the end of this season. We shall see. But here's what Hedengren has just demonstrated. This is a breakdown of every time the girls' U.S. 5,000 meter record has been broken in the last 15 years. In 2010, Emily Sisson broke it as a high schooler. She ran 15:48. That was 15 years ago. 3 years later was Mary Cain's 15:45. 5 years later was Caitlin Tuohy's 15:37, which is an indoor time. 2 years after that, Jenna Hutchins ran a few seconds faster, 15:34. 2 years after that, Natalie Cook ran 15:25, which was a crazy record. And then Leachman's record 2 years after that was only a few tenths faster. And then Hedengren, in indoors earlier this year, dropped 12 seconds off of Leachman's time, and now dropped another 16 seconds off of her own time from indoors to outdoors. She has officially lowered the record. In 1 year time, lowered the record by 28 seconds, which previously it took 14 years for someone to do that. So that's Hedengren in a nutshell. This is now her 5th and technically her 6th U.S. high school national record. She's got the 5K, which technically XC, the cross-country 5K, which technically is not a record, but she's run the best 5K time. She's got the indoor 5,000, the indoor mile, the outdoor 2 mile, and technically the outdoor 3,200, and now the outdoor 5,000. And her year is not done yet. So let's find out what happens next, I think is the question. Next event, I told you there's a lot going on. Next event is the United States Road Mile Championships. Also recently happened. And this event in particular is notable because it's part of the USATF road circuit, but it's so much different than all the other races, which are 5,000 meters and longer and things like that, up to a marathon. And so you don't get the same people usually running it, which is kind of interesting. But it is still a USATF circuit championship race. And so you get some of the top tier talent coming out for it, including Chrissy Gear, who outkicked Carissa Schweitzer and Shelby Houlihan, among others, to win the mile in 4:23.98. That is a new American road record for Chrissy Gear. Very impressive performance. And Vincent Ciotti won the men's race in his 3rd road mile title. The dude just continues to win that event over and over. So now after 4 events on the circuit, we start to see a little bit of the standings manifest, and it's always interesting to find out who's doing well and how that unfolds. We've got 4 events down and 7 more to go, so I guess there's 11 on the circuit in total. Cross country is part of it. Then there was the half marathon, the 10 mile, and now the 1 mile. And so after the first 3 events, Taylor Rowe is just dominating with her double victory half marathon 10 mile. You get so many points for winning an event, and so when you win more than one, it's huge. Taylor Rowe has made $42,000 so far this year just in the circuit. That's not too bad. Of course, it's not incredible, but it's not too bad. Emma Grace Hurley and Carrie Elwood are also not far behind her in the standings. And so depending on what Rowe does for other events, we'll see how this unfolds. On the men's side, it's Alex Mayer who has the sizable lead by finishing 1st in the half and 2nd in the 10 mile, remember, to Charles Hicks. And he's also made $33,000 and change. Remember that odd record situation with the 10 mile where he didn't win the race, but he got the record because Hicks is only kind of able to run for U.S. so far. We'll get to that later. But Alex Mayer is dominating the circuit right now. He's way ahead of Hillary Bohr, who's in a distant 2nd place. But again, it just depends on the races and the events that people do. So more to come on that. Interested to see how that continues to unfold, and we'll update you periodically. The next step in the process, we've got a 25K championship and I believe a 5K championship, both coming up in the near future. All right, and our last event to cover today is the first event of the Diamond League track circuit. That's right, the Diamond League is here. We are all very excited about that, except for our inability to watch it because Flow Track somehow has the rights to that, which is a bummer. But we can at least talk about it and share some of the interesting highlights with you because we can always find those at least. And this first installment is in China. It's the Xiamen, I think you say it. And the meet included 3 particular distance diamond events. And one of them with a world record attempt already. And it was the women's 1,000 meters. 1,000 meters. So here we're talking about the middle distance runners now. And who other than Faith Kipyegon is going to attempt another world record? And she's actually made the attempt before. Her previous best missed the world record by 17 hundredths of a second. This time she was just a touch off that, even missed it by under a quarter of a second. And so Faith Kipyegon just running an early season meet, why not, just kind of see what happens. You know that she needs to be in shape though, because if you haven't heard, Nike is doing another one of its like weird promo projects, and this one is their effort to see if a woman can run under 4 minutes in a mile. Yes, you heard it, a woman running under 4 minutes a mile. And who are they focused on to try to make that happen? Faith Kipyegon. And so that apparently is coming in June, and that's when they're going to make the attempt. But as you know, with Nike's projects, it's always a little bit uncertain what exactly they'll do with it and when that will come together, but we are excited to find out. So Faith Kipyegon has to be in shape right now, because if she's going to make a world record attempt at the mile, a serious world record attempt at the mile, sub 4, she already holds the world record, by the way. But if she's going to do that, she needs to be in shape earlier in the season than you might normally see. And with World Championships late this year, it's in September, that is not necessarily a bad thing to do. Gives you a chance to kind of focus on peaking early and then rebound back into training for a bit before the World Championships. And really, to Faith Kipyegon, I bet the Nike project is probably a little bit more important than the World Championships right now, as it were. Maybe. I'm speculating. Also in that race, Abby Caldwell of Australia set a new Australian and Oceania record when she ran 2:32.94 for second place. Oh, I forgot to mention, Faith Kipyegon's time was 2:29.21. And then the next event was the women's 5,000 meters, which was particularly notable because you had the duel once again between Beatrice Chebet of Kenya and Gudaf Sige of Ethiopia. And Gudaf Sige being the world record holder, but Chebet being the dominant racer between the two of late. And Chebet showed it yet again with a final 200 meters that was lightning fast to best Sige by 1 second, which the final time was nothing terribly notable. 14:27 when both of them have run, well, Sige has run 14 flat on the track and Chebet's run under 14 on the roads. And so they've both run quite a bit faster than that. But what was notable behind them was how deep the field was. 15 of 16 women finishing the race ran under 15 minutes, and that included an Australian record for Rose Davies, who ran 14:40, and that included 6 Ethiopian women, all between 14:28 and 14:32. 6, which is crazy. That is so much depth, and some of them are names that will not be familiar to you. So you just got to get used to seeing the Ethiopians running terribly fast right now, and it's quite exciting. How about the men's 3,000 meters steeplechase? In this particular event, when it comes to the Diamond League, that if Soufiane El Bakali of Morocco's in the race, that everyone's assuming he's going to win it, which was the case for years. His win streak was something like 9 races in a row, which is crazy. Especially at this stage, the world stage. But he lost one last year. I can't remember what it was. And he showed some weakness yet again when Samuel Firewu of Ethiopia bested him to take this first Diamond League victory. And I should also note that one of the pacers, Haile Mariam Amare, decided to stay in the race and ended up finishing 5th. So he was originally a pacer rabbit, and he ended up 5th, which is kind of fun. So there you have it. That's the opener for the Diamond League. Just a little bit to talk about there, and there's plenty more coming as the Diamond League continues. Always an exciting circuit. We'll share more. And then you get to hear about the London Marathon. Next time we're on, chances are you already know the results, because by the time you hear this, it's probably already happened. And yet, we'll be able to provide some analysis and further breakdown when we do. Before we close out, let's talk about some A to Z running updates from our group. Lots of excitement going on lately, and the Big House 5K, Martha ran her fastest 5K in years. It was very exciting. Erin ran the Dirty 30 Gravel 50K and finished 1st overall. Congrats, Erin. In fact, only one man beat her as well, so that was pretty exciting. Congratulations to AtoZ runners who ran in this year's Boston Marathon. Shout out to Spencer, Allie, and Dan. Spencer ran a new personal best by 4 minutes. Allie ran a new personal best by 6 minutes. And Dan, in his 14th Boston Marathon, qualified for Boston yet again, which is always exciting. And something like his 40th marathon ever in his life. I don't even remember exactly how many. Sorry, Dan. But that was really impressive stuff. Very incredible. Okay, just recently now as well at the Rivertown races, we had a lot of AtoZ runners representing in style. In the 5K, Justin placed second overall in a personal best time to kick off his racing season. Very exciting. And Mary, also in the 5K, won her age group. In the 10K, Lorenda ran a personal best time and was third Masters runner, and Martha won her age group and yet another of her best performances in years. Martha's in great form right now. It's awesome. In the half marathon, Mike took the overall victory, won the race. Congrats, Mike. Joe was third Masters and not far off his own best, and Andrew was third in his age group, and Grace ran as a pacer, helping out with pacing duties. So congrats to all the AtoZ runners at Rivertown races, and our great apologies that we couldn't also be there with you. This was a very unfortunate situation that meant that AtoZ running couldn't actually show up in person this year, which is tragic. But it sounds like it was an amazing race. In the Olathe Marathon, how do you say that? I don't know. In the Olathe Marathon, Craig ran and finished third in his age group. Great work, Craig. Wonderful job, and good luck next weekend in the Lincoln Marathon as well. And then the last event of the weekend for us so far was the Pinckney Ultra 50K, where Robert ran. Shout out to Robert. And then, as I mentioned, you're going to know the results of the London Marathon by the time you hear this, but we don't yet. And so good luck to Bill and Laura, who are both AtoZ runners running in the London Marathon. And best of luck to all the rest of you who are doing your running stuff. We will not be doing an AI trivia battle today because there's no Andy, and I feel it is unfair for Zach to try to win points when Andy's not present, although maybe it would give me an advantage so that she doesn't beat me so badly in our contest. In case you're keeping score, right now Andy has 3 points and Zach has 4 points, and Kathy, one of the listeners here on the show, wrote in and said she has 2 points. And so if you are following along, if you're listening to these running news updates, don't miss the AI trivia battles at the end of the episode, because you can potentially see if you best us in trivia as well. Our next round of trivia battles are likely going to relate to some of the upcoming track stuff, which will be interesting too. So good things coming, good things happening, and we appreciate your time. We appreciate your patronage, if that's the right word here, your listenership, and we look forward to sharing more great and exciting things with you next time on AtoZ Running. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.